see the two institutions represented there. I'm a long-term visitor at the University of Reading, as long as my university in Australia continue to pay me and allow me to work out of the university in Reading. But in Australia, I run a research centre, the Centre for Plant and Water Sciences. And it's within that context that I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about some of the research that we have been undertaking on urban agriculture. My background, I'm an academic, I've been at the university for about 18 years, but prior to that, and also more recently, I've been working in urban agriculture, and I used to work for Norman Borlaug, the fellow who was put up there as the sort of instigator of the Green Revolution. He was my boss. I was a minion at that time. And so, yeah, I have a great interest in international agriculture as well. So, the outline, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the system. We work with worms, with fish, and with plants. We've come up with different terms. We've got vermiculture. That's pretty straightforward. Aquaculture, which is the feeding of fish with worms, and we have got vermiponics, which is using vermilica, that is the liquor that one can get from worms, and using that as a nutrient source for hydroponics. I talk a little bit about managing the plants and then some of the follow-up activities. So what we have here are systems within systems. What we're doing really is just duplicating what takes place in nature. We've got wastes, and for our research purposes, we used a composted waste from the abattoir, which we use that because it was pretty constant, month after month. We use waste from the university cafeteria. We fed those into vermiculture. Taking the worms from the vermiculture, we fed fish, and taking the liquor from the vermiculture, we fed plants in hydroponics. Some of this was inline, some of it was batch, and I'll talk to you about the difficulties there. We also, in other work, have linked our aquaculture to hydroponics, but somebody's going to talk about that, I believe, after me. I won't discuss that at the moment, but if you want, I can give you my opinions on it at the moment. And this looks as though it's a closed system. There's no output, but of course there's plants from the hydroponics, there's fish from the aquaculture, and there's also liquid water that is not put on these particular representations. So what do we have here? This is the composted abattoir waste. This is waste from the kitchens. It's organic waste, there's no meat products in it. This is one of our technicians. In my picture here, I can see this is teeming with worms. I'm not sure if you can, but see little sort of red coils there. And this is part of the research infrastructure. Originally, we set up to the funding agency the idea of running this in situ in a commercial development. So we had the shop, we had a restaurant, we had the rooftops, we had the space, but we didn't have the local government authority to go ahead. There's all sorts of paperwork that actually stopped us from doing it. And since we had to deliver to the funding agency, we set up a small research facility at the university. So what we have here are 9 replicate vermiculture units. Within these, there's the waste that we take from whether it's abattoir or from the cafeteria. The worms are inoculated. There is a sprinkler in the roof, and the vermilica that we produce from this system is stored in these tanks, and it's a circulating system, so every hour, couple of hours, some of the vermilica is pumped back into the vermiculture units and permeates through the waste and back. And this, I should hasten to point out, is in a subtropical, it's actually on the tropical Capricorn environment. So we don't have a problem with light, because we were focusing on growing out in the open, i.e. on rooftops, and we also don't have a problem with temperature, not low temperature, so there isn't a constraint throughout the year in terms of growing plants. There is a constraint in terms of high temperature during the summer. Just touch on that briefly as well. So, giving you a few other pictorial impressions. Here are some of the plants. We use the species pak choi. The reason for using this isn't because we are great consumers of it, but we became great consumers of it. The reason is because it's a very short season crop. We can get a crop in and out within the space of about a month. So we could, in a master's project, seem to be very popular with this sort of work. In a master's project, we were able to get the student to run a dozen experiments for their thesis. These are the fish tanks, and here we have part of the hydroponics unit. This is part of the batch unit, so we took the liquor from the vermiculture and put it into these tanks. You can see they're suitably insulated because of high temperature, on timers, and the vermiliquor was then used as a nutrient source and liquid water for transpiration to the pak choi plants grown either as a nutrient film technique. It's just a thin film of liquid that runs essentially along drain pipes with holes in them. And we also ran the system with plants in pots with an inert media in them. So the focus of the study, we were looking at production efficiencies in terms of the vegetables and the fish, and we measured a lot of parameters: the water, the quality, electrochemical, nutrients within the wastes before they were worked upon by the worms, looking at the nutrients in the worm casts, in the vermiliquor, and all through the system. I'm not going to, although the title indicated I'll be talking about nutrient budgets and the like, I'm not going to go into too much of the detail of that. So just looking at the vermiculture results, first of all, for every 100 kilograms of organic material that was processed, we got approximately 180 litres of the vermiponic liquor, which we call vermiliquor, 89 kilograms of worm cast, and 8 kilograms of live worms. Now, I will put up a reference at the end to a report that gives you all of the nutrient compositions of these, of the plants, of the fish as well, so that you can see that we have actually done nutrient budgets. Here I put up some data on the properties of the vermiliquor at different times of the year. Unfortunately, the scale is the same, but the units are different, and it's a scale that goes up 25 because of the temperature. As you can see, in the summer, the red, one would expect temperature to be high. The pH, the feature to notice here is that it is above 7, so it's above neutral. And the reason for that is that the worms work best under those sorts of conditions. That is an issue for using the vermiliquor, but that's how it is. The electrical conductivity between 1 and 2 millisiemens per centimetre, this is roughly in the range that you might expect for a traditional hydroponic mix, if you're going to run hydroponics with an inorganic nutrient source. Dissolved oxygen, well, within the realms of reason, between 6 and 7 or 8 parts per million. That's a percentage, it should be parts per million. And that's what you would expect. I'll talk a little bit about it in a moment. The temperature of the vermiliquor, well, plants do best if the soil environment is less than 30 degrees centigrade. The vermiliquor was less than that when we started putting it into the system to feed the plants, and we were able to keep it down. And I just put in some ammonium atoms there. If we look at the results from the catfish, we fed them with worms, we fed them with a commercial feed. Here are the individual fish weights. There was no significant difference between the worm feed and commercial feed. Now this is interesting because you read in the literature that catfish and other fish don't like eating fresh worms. Well, of course, fishermen will say different, but in commercial practice, we were able to feed the worms, feed the fish with the worms, and they did eat them effectively. In terms of specific growth rate, somewhat similar between the worm feed and the commercial feed. Feed conversion ratio, a little bit less. So what this means is we needed 2.5 kilograms of dry worm feed to produce 1 kilogram of fish. So a little bit less efficient with the worm feed, but not too bad. It was going quite well. And if we look at, in summary, the vermiponic results, the fresh weight of the vermiponic plants was, oh, this is interesting. I'm sorry, I thought it changes on the train, but obviously I didn't. This 90 and the 80 should be back to front. Normally, between 80 and 90% of the yield that we would be getting from plants that had been grown on a commercial hydroponic mix. So it was quite acceptable. Dry weights were also within the same sort of range. 2 of our 12 experiments we didn't get that same high yield, and we know the reasons why. There were issues with the pH of the solution. We had to buffer it down. I'll come to that in a moment. We used both the nutrient film technique and the pot system, and we found that the this again is wrong. I thought it changed it. The nutrient film technique is not better than the sun heat. The pot system is better. So here's some of the some illustrations, let's say, of the performance of the plants. Here we have pak choy grown with controlled nutrient, and here we have pak choy with the vermilica. It's looking pretty poor. You would say not 100% or 80% of this. Reason being that this was not buffered. So its pH was 8, 8.5, 7.5. Here we have comparison between 2 different sources of nutrients. This is the waste from the commercial cafeteria in the university, and this is the waste coming from the abattoir. But the reason that these are not looking as good as this is that these were growing as an inline system. So we thought maybe we could have our worms working away, and we could directly take the vermilica from the worms in those tanks and run it, recycle it through a hydroponic system. It's not possible, and one of the main reasons for that is that the pH here is up around 8, and we know that if we don't buffer it, that we are going to have severe negative effects on the growth of the plants. Just put these in here. Other issues that we had, for example, here we have aphids, but in the system where we had an inline, we couldn't apply any insecticides to those plants because this was in line with the worms, and we didn't want to do that. Here, this is looking a little bit better. Here we've got control, 100% vermilica, 50%, and replicates here. So when we're managing it well, the yields are very decent. So although above ground or above nutrient, they look the same, if we look at them in terms of their roots, we can see that we've got pretty dirty, ugly-looking roots in the vermiculture plants compared to what one would expect with controlled hydroponic system. And here we've got a closer up of the 50%, so we diluted the vermilica in some treatments. We ran at 100%, we ran at 100%. And here again, we have got another illustration of the unbuffered vermilica, buffered vermilica, and our direct linkage here. So that was in line, the plants receiving the nutrients from the worms directly, whereas here we had taken the vermilica, we had stored it, we had buffered it. Not looking too bad in terms of the direct linkage, but unbuffered vermilica definitely looking poor. I'll just go through a couple of bits of results now. In terms of changing the pH, what we wanted to do is to knock the pH down probably to about 5. So that meant that we had to drop it by a region of 3 or 3.5 units. And at the beginning of the experiments, we had to use quite a lot This is 10% nitric acid applied to 100 litres of vermiliquor. You can see that early on in the life of the plant, we get a big response to our addition of nitric acid. Through the season, as the system itself is we have to add less nitric acid to get an effective reduction in the pH. We're also interested to look at the effects of our hydroponic treatment, that's with the control, and our vermiliquor in terms of the oxygen demand from the inline vermiliquor. Yes, it was, so we've got here dissolved oxygen, we have got temperature. We can see that overall there is a tendency for the dissolved oxygen at any particular temperature to be less in the inline vermiliquor compared to the control. That could be an issue, but not a major issue. In fact, these the two regressions they fit on top of each other if we do a statistical test for them. We looked at various other parameters throughout the experiments. This is, you see, experiment 10 here. This is the electrical conductivity in millisiemens per centimeter. The control treatment started off about 1.5. Started off about 1.5, and over the life of the crop it goes down. And the reason for that is that the plant's taking up nutrients, removing ions, and the electrical conductivity is going down. In the 100% vermiliquor and the 50% vermiliquor, we can see actually over time it goes up because it's an organic system. If we look at nitrate concentration in the nutrient solution, again, if we look at the control, as we would expect, it goes down, down, down until the time that we harvest and there's next to no nitrate in the solution. That's great because it's all taken up by the plants. But in the vermiliquor treatments, although there is a decline, you can see that there is still nitrate in the solution at the end of the experiment. Potassium, likewise, in terms of the control, drops considerably down to next to no measurable at the end of the experiment. And likewise, interesting enough, for the vermiliquor as well. But also you can notice that the vermiliquor potassium is about 5 times less than it is in the control. Didn't seem to see any obvious effect in the plants, but it also goes down to nothing at the end of the experiment. Not expecting you to read that, it's just to direct your attention to the report if you want to look at it, because all of the experiments, all of the data are there in terms of their fresh weight, dry weights, comparisons with the control. And likewise, if you're so inclined and you want to look at the concentration of the macro and micronutrients in the produce, for most of the experiments where we had money to do it, the analyses were completed. So who do I thank? I thank Elena Churilova, who was the master's student, Brock, who is a technician, myself, and a former PhD student who was also involved in this project as an advisor. So what about aquaponics? We played about with it, but with non-edible crops, so this is with roses here. I expect we're going to talk about that in a moment. In terms of follow-up work, this study was completed last year. We have now been funded by OSE, which is somewhat akin to DFID, to run a study in Nepal with vegetable market wastes. And I've got another student who's just starting looking at feeding biochar to chicken and then passing it through, and also looking at the chicken dung and the biochar as a source for the worms to work on. And one of the reasons behind that is that possibly we can overcome some of the issues with the high pH required for worms. And I've also got another student who's been looking at vermiliquor as a nutrient source and a source of all sorts of other beneficials in terms of compost teas as well. So I'll leave this one up. I want to thank RIRDC, which is the Rural Industries Research Development Corporation of the Australian Government, for funding, for Vermicrobe, who provided us with facilities, as did Elgrow. The full report is here, and I guess if I click on this, I don't know, could possibly go there. So I might click in a second, but if not, here's the information about the rooftop gardens. It's a bit of a misnomer. It was set out to be rooftop. It wasn't actually in the end. And I put this up here because if there are horticulturalists amongst you, I want to promote the International Horticultural Congress 2014 in Brisbane, and I'm organising the committee. So shall I
Go for it. Go.
I don't know.
Test our technology to destruction by the look of it. While that's whirring,
Yes.
Any questions? David, yes, please.
Just what, have you done any work, obviously you've got all the work on worms there, have you done any work on maggots, particularly sort of black soldier fly and things like that? Is that?
No.
No.
Not myself.
Right.
Others have, but not in that context.
Okay.
Not in the sort of the reuse of waste context. Yes, there's the.
And you mentioned about the organic waste you use for the hydroponic system. And how can avoid the smell, the sometimes not nice smell? If the growing in the city, the smell will be a bigger problem. So how to avoid the organic waste smell?
Well, ours didn't smell, but they were outside. And that's the point I should mention. In the ideal system, we would have the fish present for the people who are in the restaurant to say, I would like that fish, and they can have it cooked up, and then its waste, well, the vegetable waste would go back into the nutrient cycling system. So we would have it probably in basements, but there is another issue there. Now I know a little bit about worms, not as much as Darwin, but I know quite a bit. And one has to shine lights on these cabinets because otherwise the worms will come out if it's dark. It's very interesting. And I'm interested in it from a physiological point of view as well because I like plants and like quality. And I'm interested to know what it is that in light that we give in the general environment to stop the worms leaving their homes. But we put it in a place where it's not going to smell, basically. But we haven't had smell. Maybe that's because of the technique where we're using some lime, some newspaper, and various other, some tricks that are trade secrets from Birmingham that we're not allowed to talk about. Okay, sorry.
Thanks very much. I don't think you've got a round of applause on that yet.